At Thanksgiving dinner, my daughter thanked everyone except one person. Thanksgiving always smelled like sage and butter in our house, a warm fog drifting through the hallway as relatives arrived. The dining room glowed amber, crowded with coats, laughter, and the soft clink of serving spoons on the table nearby. It was the kind of afternoon that felt rehearsed, comfortable, and safe, with football murmuring from the living room. I remember thinking how grateful I was for normalcy, for routines that held us together during holidays like this one again. My daughter sat to my right, knees tucked under the table, hair pulled back in a simple clip. She seemed quiet but steady, fingers tracing the rim of her glass while candles flickered and plates steamed softly between us there. After we filled our plates, someone suggested a toast, just a quick thank you before eating. It felt old-fashioned and sweet, the kind of tradition you don't question, especially when bellies are full and voices already warm with family gathered close. My daughter surprised us by standing, chair legs scraping softly against hardwood. She cleared her throat, eyes bright, and said she wanted to thank everyone for being here today and making the day special in her own words to us. There was a little laugh around the table, proud and amused, and I felt my chest swell. She didn't usually like attention, and seeing her brave felt tender, like watching a candle steady in a draft during quiet moments alone. She started with her grandparents, thanking them for stories and patience, her voice calm. Each name landed gently, like a place setting being put down on the table without clatter or rush. I watched faces soften around me quietly then. She thanked her aunts, uncles, cousins, even her little brother, smiling at each. The room felt hushed but warm, punctuated by nods and murmured agreement as forks paused and eyes followed her closely. I tasted salt and turkey on my tongue. Then she thanked me, her mom, for listening and showing up, her words simple. My throat tightened and I blinked hard, staring at the mashed potatoes as steam rose and butter pooled slowly. I squeezed my napkin beneath the table. She went on, thanking teachers, friends, even the neighbor who drove her to practice. It felt thorough, intentional, like she had practiced every line in her head during quiet evenings alone. I smiled, relaxed shoulders easing with each breath out. As her list grew shorter, I glanced around, noticing one place setting untouched. A familiar presence sat across from us, hands folded, waiting. The air felt tighter, like pressure before rain. I shifted in my chair, wood creaking softly beneath. My daughter paused, took a breath, and smiled again, smaller this time. She looked around once more, then continued speaking carefully. Her eyes slid past one person without stopping. I felt heat creep up my neck as seconds stretched long. When she finished, she sat down, chair whispering against the floor. Applause didn't come, only a scattered murmur and uneasy smiles. I noticed one silence louder than the rest. Someone cleared their throat nearby. Silverware clinked too sharply for comfort. The person she skipped shifted slightly, forcing a grin that didn't reach their eyes. No one spoke, and the moment hung there. I felt embarrassment flare, hot and sudden, protective instincts rising. My pulse thudded in my ears loudly now. I wanted to smooth it over, to laugh or say something gentle. But my daughter's posture was steady, her choice unmistakable. She kept her gaze on her plate, breathing evenly. I felt a slow, dawning understanding settle in my chest. Confusion gave way to a sharper awareness, like a light clicking on. This wasn't forgetfulness or nerves. It was deliberate. I studied her face, calm and resolved beyond her years. The room exhaled slowly as if sensing weight in silence. My stomach twisted with questions I didn't yet have words for. I felt the urge to protect her, even from glances around us. Food cooled, aromas fading slightly. I pressed my foot against hers under the table, grounding us both. No one addressed it, and conversation slowly restarted, cautious and thin. Laughter returned in fragments, never quite full. I watched my daughter sip water, hands steady. The skip place setting remained heavy with meaning, like an unsaid sentence lingering there. I knew then that this wasn't a mistake or childish oversight. It was a message, carefully placed in the middle of gratitude, My heart softened. Even as it ached, whatever the reason, it mattered. I breathed in, slowly accepting quietly. As the meal went on, I held that understanding close like a fragile dish. Her silence toward that one person spoke volumes. I didn't know why yet, but I respected it. The table felt changed, quietly honest and strangely calm. After the scattered applause faded, the room filled with a strange, brittle quiet. Conversation tried to restart, but it moved like cold gravy, slow and lumpy, leaving everyone painfully aware of the space her words had carved into the air. I stayed seated, smiling when expected, though my chest felt hollow and tight. Surrounded by family noise, I felt oddly alone, as if a thin glass wall separated me from the table and muffled every sound reaching my ears now. Utensils hovered midair longer than necessary, then clinked down too hard. I noticed stiff shoulders, forced nods, eyes darting quickly away whenever they drifted toward the person she hadn't acknowledged, as if contact might ignite something nobody wanted named here. The air felt thicker, heavy with turkey steam and unasked questions. Someone laughed too loudly at nothing, and the sound landed flat, echoing awkwardly against the low ceiling while I traced circles on my plate with a fork slowly there. I kept glancing at my daughter, trying not to stare. She focused on her food, shoulders slightly hunched, movements careful, as though any sudden motion might invite questions she wasn't ready to answer from anyone sitting too close nearby today. The person she skipped remained present in every sense, their silence louder than conversation. They cleared their throat, adjusted their napkin, and smiled again, a practiced expression that never warmed, sending a chill across the table and into me quietly. I realized how carefully we'd all been playing our roles for years. Harmony, I believed, was proof of love, not noticing how easily discomfort hid beneath polite rituals and shared meals like dust under a rug nobody lifted before now. Watching my daughter withdraw stirred a quiet panic in me. I wanted to ask what she'd meant, what I'd missed, but fear pressed heavier than curiosity like a hand on my chest, warning me to pause and breathe slowly again. Questions crowded my thoughts, each sharper than the last. Had I mistaken peace for safety, silence for consent, tradition for trust within our family all this time as we passed dishes and avoided difficult, necessary conversations for years together here? I felt torn between protecting my child and protecting the moment. Speaking up might shatter something fragile, yet staying quiet felt like choosing ignorance on purpose. My fork paused midair, mirroring the tension inside me as breath slowed around us. My daughter didn't look up once, even when dessert arrived. Pumpkin pie smelled sweet and spiced, but she ate mechanically, eyes fixed somewhere far beyond the table as if distance could keep her feelings contained safely for the moment longer. I caught fragments of conversation about weather and work, safe topics offered like bandages. Each word felt carefully placed, avoiding the tender spot none of us acknowledged while plates scraped softly, marking time we couldn't rewind or escape just then. The longer the meal continued, the more observant I became. I watched posture, tone, pauses, realizing how much truth lives in what goes unsaid, especially when everyone pretends not to notice the obvious right in front of us all now. Part of me wanted to pull her aside, whisper reassurance. Another part knew interrupting her quiet boundary might feel like betrayal, even if my intentions were loving. So I swallowed words, tasting bitterness along with cranberry sauce that lingered long. I remembered past holidays, laughter layered over small discomforts. How many moments had I ignored, assuming children adapt, that family unity meant endurance, without realizing endurance can quietly become a burden carried alone by those least able to choose otherwise. The skipped thank you echoed louder with every passing minute. It reframed the room, turning familiar faces into questions, memories into uncertain evidence I hadn't known I was collecting for years without noticing the pattern forming quietly behind smiles and hugs. I felt a protective calm settle over me, unexpected and steady. Instead of reacting, I listened, letting the moment unfold without my interference, trusting that observation might reveal more than confrontation ever could if I remained patient and present there. My daughter finally glanced at me, just once, eyes unreadable. It wasn't a plea, just acknowledgement, and I answered with a small, steady nod, the kind that promises support without demanding explanation or answers before she was ready yet today. The tension eased slightly, like a knot loosening a fraction. Plates were cleared, chairs shifted, and the room breathed again. Though nothing was truly resolved, I felt steadier, committed to seeing rather than steering what came next in her silence. As the evening stretched on, I chose stillness over certainty. I would watch, listen, and wait, trusting that quiet attention was the first step toward understanding even when answers felt distant, hidden beneath familiar noise and shared laughter around us. I grew up believing our family story was safe always. It was filled with shared holidays, laughter, and unquestioned trust. The person missing from my daughter's thanks shaped that story. They were family close enough that distance crossed my mind. They married into our lives, becoming fixtures at every gathering. Thanksgivings, birthdays, and summers blurred together around their presence always. For years I trusted them, without hesitation or second thoughts. They babysat, offered advice, and stepped in whenever we needed. My daughter adored them in a way that felt innocent. She ran to hugs, climbed laps, and followed them everywhere. I remember the sound of her laughter during those visits. It felt like proof that our family bonds were strong. Looking back now, that warmth feels thinner, more conditional somehow. Memory shifts when you finally allow yourself to question it. There were moments I brushed aside because they seemed minor. A pause too long, a joke, time to look lingering. At the time, I blamed my own sensitivity or stress. I told myself family closeness sometimes feels uncomfortable for parents. They like spending time alone with my daughter often then. I trusted it because trust had always defined us before. Now that trust feels like something I handed over blindly. I went to remembering how quickly I defended them internally then. Holidays blended into a single warm, reassuring memory for years. They were always present, smiling, helpful, and involved with us. My daughter once made cards just for them, proudly alone. She asked when they would visit again, constantly as kids. That devotion is what unsettles me most now, lately, deeply. It reframes everything I thought I understood before back then. Small moments resurface with sharper edges than before these days. Their hand on her shoulder lasting a beat longer still. A closed door, I told myself, meant privacy and trust. I ignored the tightness in my stomach, then every time. Nostalgia can soften warning signs until they disappear from view. I wanted our story to stay intact and comforting forever. Admitting doubt felt like betraying family loyalty built over years. So I chose comfort over curiosity repeatedly for many years. Now the past feels different when I replay it slowly. Details I dismissed feel louder and heavier with each memory. I grieve the version of safety I believed in completely. It hurts realizing love didn't guarantee protection for my child. The person I trusted sits differently in my mind now. Their smile and memories feels less warm than before remembered. Family history no longer feels like solid ground beneath me. It shifts quietly, leaving me uncertain and unsettled inside today. I think about how children sense things adults miss sometimes. My daughter may have known before I did ever consciously. That thought brings both guilt and humility into my heart. She trusted her instincts when I did not at first. The past now feels like a house with cracks hidden. Beautiful from afar, fragile up close once examined carefully inside. I sit with these memories, letting unease replace nostalgia slowly. It is uncomfortable, but necessary for truth and future healing. Our family story wasn't a lie entirely, but incomplete always. Safety assumed is not safety proven in lived experience ever. I feel a quiet resolve forming underneath regret and sadness. Understanding matters more than preserving appearances now for my child. The warmth of memory cools into careful reflection over time. I can no longer see the past as harmless again. This realization settles slowly like dusk outside the window tonight, soft but impossible to ignore once it arrives inside you. I hold my daughter's childhood memories differently now with care. They deserve honesty, not denial, even when it feels painful. Trust, once broken in hindsight, reveals its cost to me. I see how easily love can blind a parent completely. The family I thought I knew feels altered in memory. Not erased, but reshaped by truth I resisted seeing before. Unease replaces nostalgia as my dominant emotion these quiet nights. It hums beneath everyday routines like electricity under skin always. I wish I had listened closer sooner to subtle signs. Regret sits heavy, but it teaches awareness now matters most. The past may never feel safe again in my mind. Accepting that truth hurts quietly without drama or noise today. Still, I prefer discomfort over comforting illusions about family harmony. My daughter deserves clarity and protection even if delayed before. The story I told myself is changing shape with age. I am learning to sit with that without rushing answers. Memories still glow, but shadows are visible around their edges. Both truths exist side by side in my heart now. I carry this revised history gently forward with humility today. The past was not as safe as remember back then. The first cracks didn't appear as alarms or obvious red flags. They showed up quietly, folded into ordinary days, easy to explain away. I noticed my daughter hesitating before visits she once loved. She'd linger by the door, fingers twisting fabric, eyes avoiding mine. When I asked, she said she was tired or had homework. I believed her because belief was easier than suspicion. After time spent with them, her mood shifted in subtle ways. She became withdrawn, quieter, retreating to her room without explanation. I told myself kids change as they grow. I blamed school stress, hormones, the normal messiness of childhood. She stopped wanting to be alone with them. She'd ask if I could stay nearby, phrasing it casually, almost joking. I laughed it off, saying I trusted family. I regret how light my voice sounded in those moments. Sometimes she clung to me unexpectedly after visits. Her hugs were tighter, longer, as if anchoring herself back home. I noticed, but didn't investigate further. I told myself affection fluctuates, that I was overthinking again. There were nights she struggled to sleep afterward. I heard her pacing, floorboards creaking softly down the hallway. When I asked what was wrong, she shrugged. I don't know, she'd say, eyes fixed on the wall. I accepted that answer far too easily. Not knowing felt safer than asking the wrong question. Once, she asked if she could skip a visit entirely. Her voice was careful, like she expected resistance. I said no, reminding her of family obligations. The look on her face still haunts me. She tried speaking in fragments, not accusations. Comments about feeling weird or uncomfortable slipped out occasionally. I responded with logic instead of listening. I explained intentions, dismissed feelings, smoothed everything over. I see now how she tested the waters with me, how she measured whether it was safe to say more. There were moments she went quiet mid-sentence. Her mouth opened, then closed like she'd changed her mind. I didn't ask why. I let the silence stand because it didn't demand action. Each time, I chose comfort over curiosity. Each time, I told myself I was protecting peace. Deep down, unease flickered like a faulty light. I felt it, but learned how to ignore it well. Parenting teaches you to triage constant worries. I filed these moments under manageable, not urgent. I see now how wrong that was. Some signals don't scream, they whisper repeatedly. I trusted the history more than the present. Years of shared meals outweighed my daughter's shifting behavior. Guilt settles in when I replay those days. I hear her voice differently now, strained and cautious. She didn't have the words yet. She relied on me to hear what she couldn't say. Instead, I rationalized everything into nothing. I told myself I was being reasonable, mature, fair. Denial can feel like responsibility when wrapped in logic. I mistook restraint for wisdom, silence for stability. The cracks widened slowly, patiently. I stayed busy, distracted, assuming time would smooth them out. I wish I'd asked harder questions sooner. I wish I'd trusted discomfort instead of dismissing it. Suspicion didn't arrive fully formed. It crept in piece by piece, too late. There was no single moment of clarity then, just a growing heaviness I kept pushing aside. Now that weight presses back, it asks why I didn't stop and listen. I carry the knowledge that she tried, that she reached out in the only way she knew how. My failure wasn't cruelty or neglect. It was hesitation, denial, misplaced faith in familiarity. Acknowledging that hurts more than anger ever could. It forces me to face my own responsibility. I love my child deeply, but love alone didn't make me attentive enough. The first cracks were visible. I simply chose not to see them yet. The question followed me for days after Thanksgiving. It lingered in quiet rooms, pressing against my thoughts when everything else slowed. I replayed the toast over and over in my head. Her steady voice, the deliberate pause, the empty space where one name should have been. At night, the house felt louder than usual. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock, all amplified my unease. I argued with myself constantly. Was I projecting fear onto a moment that simply hurt my pride? Part of me wanted to protect her from reliving pain. Another part feared what protecting silence might cost her. Family betrayal felt like an impossible concept. It threatened the foundation of everything I thought we were. I worried that asking would open something I couldn't close. That once spoken, the truth would change all of us forever. Yet not asking felt worse with each passing day. It felt like repeating my old mistake in real time. Her behavior didn't return to normal after the holiday. She moved through the house carefully, emotionally guarded. She avoided certain rooms, certain times of day. I noticed how she watched doors, how she stayed close to me. The omission at dinner played in my mind like a warning bell. It wasn't impulsive. It was intentional, anchored in something deeper. I realized I was more afraid of knowing than she was of telling. That realization filled me with shame. One evening, I found a quiet moment. No distractions, no background noise, just space and stillness. I didn't rehearse words. I focused on being present, on keeping my body calm. I sat near her, close enough to feel her tension. Her shoulders were tight, breath shallow, eyes wary. I made the check-in gentle, careful. Not an interrogation, not an accusation, just openness. I watched her face more than anything else. That's where the answer arrived before anything else could. Her expression changed instantly. It was like a wall finally cracking under pressure. She didn't speak right away. Her eyes filled, then dropped, hands curling inward. That reaction told me everything I needed to know. Something real had happened, something harmful. My chest burned with a sudden, fierce protectiveness. It rose fast, mixing with grief and disbelief. I fought the urge to react explosively. This moment wasn't about my anger, but her safety. She seemed smaller somehow, younger, as if carrying a weight far too heavy alone. No details came then, only confirmation that her silence had meaning. I felt my heart break quietly, not loudly, not dramatically, but thoroughly. Every rationalization I'd made collapsed at once. There was no room left for doubt. Rage flickered at the edges of my restraint. Not wild, but focused, sharpening my resolve. I thought about every time I dismissed her discomfort. Each memory felt like a personal failure. I stayed calm on the outside. Inside, something fundamental shifted permanently. I made it clear without words that I believed her. That alone seemed to steady her breathing slightly. We stayed there for a while. No pressure, no demands, just shared air and understanding. The house felt different afterward. Heavier, but also more honest. I didn't have the full story yet. I didn't need it to know my next step. Whatever had been done, it mattered. And it had been hidden for too long. I felt a deep, grounding certainty settle in. This was no longer about family harmony. It was about protection, accountability, and truth. Even if that truth dismantled everything familiar. I knew there would be consequences ahead. Confrontations, fractures, irreversible changes. But in that moment, clarity outweighed fear. My role was no longer passive or unsure. I committed silently to uncovering everything. At her pace, in her time, but completely. No more avoidance. No more choosing comfort over courage. The question I feared had already been answered. Now it was my responsibility to follow it through. The discovery began quietly, without a single dramatic moment, just a series of details aligning under harsh kitchen light alone. I started noticing patterns I had ignored, dates circled, visits timed, absences explained away too smoothly for years now there. Old emails surfaced while searching receipts. Nothing explicit, but the tone felt wrong, overly familiar. Possessive in hindsight today alone. I found notes about babysitting schedules, adjusted repeatedly, always favoring privacy, always framed as helpful concern for us, then somehow. Memories clicked into place with uncomfortable precision, each recalled moment tightening my chest, sharpening blurred recollections suddenly painfully clearly now. I remembered how praise was used, gifts offered after tension, reassurance layered over unease like insulation against questions later forming. Confusion gave way to clarity slowly, not as relief, but as a heavy certainty settling inside me without permission first. Trust had been weaponized carefully, kindness used as cover, authority borrowed from family bonds to disarm doubt over years consistently. I saw manipulation in hindsight, isolation masked as attention, secrecy framed as specialness designed to silence resistance quietly over time. Each realization collapsed another piece of our family image, walls cracking silently around cherished traditions I protected too long alone. I felt grief for what I believed, mourning memories that now felt staged and unsafe in retrospect, painfully so today. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It stretched across years, hidden by routine and my compliance through silence. I mistook safety there. I examined calendars, noticing gaps where explanations repeated, always reasonable, always unchallenged by me, because I wanted peace then desperately. Clarity hurt more than confusion ever had, because it demanded accountability from me as parent, protector, and witness to harm. I saw how my trust enabled access, how my silence created opportunity over and over again, unchecked by me alone. Shock transformed into resolve gradually, a steadier emotion replacing panic and disbelief as breathing slowed and focus sharpened inside me. I no longer questioned whether harm existed, only how deep it ran and how long I missed signs entirely before. The family image I cherished collapsed inward, revealing fragility beneath polished rituals I defended without examination for years, naively trusting. Anger arrived clean and focused, not wild, directed toward protection and truth rather than retaliation or performance for others watching. I understood silence had served the wrong person for too long and endangered the one I loved most without defense. Every aligned detail strengthened my resolve, leaving little room for doubt. Once patterns replaced excuses completely in my mind now. I documented what I found carefully, dates, behaviors, connections forming a quiet ledger that steadied my shaking hands at night. This wasn't about vengeance yet. It was about responsibility to stop harm and honor my child with action, now decisively. I felt steadier as truth assembled itself, replacing chaos with direction like a compass finally pointing north through darkness ahead. Memories no longer felt random. They formed a coherent warning I could no longer ignore responsibly without betraying her again. Determination settled in my body, warm and heavy, grounding me like weight before lifting something important that matters deeply forever. I accepted the consequences ahead, fractures, confrontations, irreversible change, because safety demanded action over comfort for our family, now collectively. The clarity did not bring peace, but it brought purpose, and purpose steadied my shaking resolve into something usable today. I stopped minimizing and started planning next steps carefully with patience, respect, and unwavering focus on her well-being first always. Evidence didn't scream. It whispered insistently until I listened, and listening changed everything inside me about my role now forward. I recognize manipulation thrives where trust remains unquestioned, and I vowed never to offer blind access again to anyone ever. The shock receded, leaving a calm readiness behind to speak, act, and protect decisively when the moment required courage most. I understood secrecy had protected harm, not harmony, and that truth deserved daylight immediately despite discomfort and fallout that followed. The decision formed quietly, firm and irreversible. I would no longer participate in silence that endangered my child again, ever. I breathed deeply, tasting resolve alongside lingering fear, knowing courage often coexists with trembling hands and steady intentions moving forward. Silence was no longer neutral. It was a choice I refused to make again, knowingly after seeing the cost clearly. With clarity came responsibility to act deliberately, not rashly, but with unwavering commitment to protection, truth, and repair where possible. I steadied myself for conversations ahead, difficult and necessary, grounded by evidence and maternal resolve that would not waver again. This discovery changed everything inside our home, reshaping priorities, boundaries, and definitions of love towards safety, honesty, and courage now. I chose my next step with intention, knowing silence was no longer an option for me or my child anywhere. Once I allowed myself to see it, the pattern became unavoidable. Years of moments aligned, forming a clear line I couldn't look away from anymore. I revisited birthdays, holidays, casual dinners in my mind. Scenes replayed with new lighting, shadows where warmth once lived. I remembered how they positioned themselves at gatherings. Always nearby, always attentive, always just close enough to monitor. I saw how they volunteered for trust-building roles. The helpful one, the dependable one, the person no one questioned. It devastated me how easily warning signs were concealed, not hidden aggressively, just softened by familiarity and routine. They never rushed or crossed lines publicly. Everything was calculated, incremental, designed to blend in. I remembered compliments directed at me, not my daughter. Reassurance meant to disarm my instincts before they fully formed. Every family event felt compromised in hindsight. Laughter replayed with an echo of something unspoken beneath it. I noticed how my daughter's silence protected everyone but herself. She endured quietly, adapting instead of demanding attention. Her strength stunned me when I really saw it. She survived an environment I failed to question deeply enough. She learned to navigate safely within unsafe spaces. That realization cut deeper than any anger I felt. The antagonist's behavior revealed itself as strategic. Charm used as camouflage, patience used as leverage. They never needed force when trust did the work. That understanding made my stomach turn. I grieved the years lost to ignorance. Moments I thought were harmless now felt contaminated. Anger surged through me in waves. Hot, impulsive, begging for immediate confrontation. But I held it back deliberately. Reacting emotionally would risk my daughter's safety. I reminded myself this wasn't about me. It was about protecting her now and moving forward wisely. I watched my daughter closely during this time. I focused on stability, consistency, reassurance without pressure. She didn't ask for explanations. She only needed to feel safe again. I began researching quietly, methodically, legal steps, emotional resources, ways to proceed carefully. I documented timelines, behaviors, witnesses. Each note strengthened the plan forming in my mind. The more I connected dots, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't a misunderstanding or isolated mistake. It was a long-term pattern of access and control, and it thrived because I trusted blindly. That truth hurt, but it sharpened my focus. Self-blame had to wait. Action came first. I adjusted routines, limited contact, changed expectations. Subtle shifts, nothing alarming yet. My daughter seemed to notice the changes. Her shoulders lowered slightly, her breathing eased. That response confirmed I was moving correctly. Safety speaks quietly when it begins returning. I struggled with wanting justice immediately, with wanting them exposed publicly, consequences instant. But restraint felt more powerful than rage. A plan offered protection, not chaos. I reminded myself that careful action lasts longer. It creates results instead of reactions. I consulted professionals without naming everything aloud yet. I needed guidance, not validation. Each conversation grounded me further. This was real, serious, and required patience. The family image I once defended felt irrelevant now. Preserving appearances ranked below preserving my child. I saw how endurance had been mistaken for resilience. My daughter should never have had to be so strong. That realization hardened my resolve. No more quiet endurance for either of us. I began preparing for what came next. Not emotionally, but practically. I organized evidence, secured boundaries, built support. Each step steadied my hands. Anger still lived in me, but it no longer drove my decisions. Purpose replaced it slowly. Clear, focused, protective. I spoke to my daughter through actions, not words. Consistency became my language. She didn't need promises. She needed follow-through. The pattern I saw too late now guided me forward. I wouldn't miss another signal again. Preparation felt like reclaiming control, not over the past, but over our future. I moved carefully, deliberately, quietly. A plan was forming, solid and patient. And for the first time since Thanksgiving, I felt ready to act with intention that I made the choice to stay quiet, even when every instinct screamed at me to act. The temptation to confront them immediately was almost unbearable, like a fire threatening to consume everything. I reminded myself that strategy required patience, not impulse. Every word, every glance had to be measured, deliberate, calculated for impact later. Pretending normalcy took a toll I hadn't anticipated. Smiles felt heavy, laughter hollow. Conversation forced while tension hummed under the surface. The antagonist remained unaware, moving confidently as if nothing had changed. Their ease only sharpened my focus, each step revealing how carefully I had to tread. I watched my daughter slowly begin to heal in small ways. She laughed a little more freely, let her shoulders drop, and trusted my presence quietly. Supporting her meant silence on my part, action behind the scenes. I offered reassurance without interrogation, space without abandonment, safety without explanation. Every interaction became a balancing act, preserving appearances while collecting information. Documents, patterns, observations, all cataloged carefully for when the time came to act. Intelligence replaced rage as my guiding force. Every decision was made with purpose, not emotion, ensuring our next steps were precise. I noticed subtle shifts in the antagonist's behavior. They remained overly confident, unaware that every move was being recorded mentally, cataloged. I restrained my anger, letting it simmer quietly beneath calm surfaces. This restraint became a weapon of its own, sharper than confrontation would have been. Days blended into weeks of careful observation. Each visit, each gesture, each conversation added pieces to the puzzle I was assembling. My daughter's comfort became my priority over my desire for immediate justice. Protecting her emotionally required patience, which was difficult but necessary. I documented anomalies quietly, photographing evidence of patterns without drawing attention. Every detail mattered, no matter how small it seemed in the moment. Pretending everything was normal demanded constant vigilance. The weight of unspoken knowledge pressed on me, pressing against my ribs with silent urgency. I developed routines to observe without alerting suspicion. Watching, listening, cataloging, all while maintaining a veneer of ordinary family life. I reminded myself that impulsive action could destroy what little control we had. Every carefully preserved moment increased the likelihood of a successful outcome later. I felt a mix of exhaustion and resolve. Protecting my daughter while remaining silent drained me physically and emotionally. Her small victories, a laugh, a smile, a relaxed shoulder, reminded me why restraint mattered. Each of these moments was proof that quiet observation served her better than immediate confrontation. I became acutely aware of subtle cues, shifts in tone, body language, fleeting expressions, all noted and stored mentally for future reference. Intelligence over rage meant planning the perfect moment, Every action had to align with the safety and well-being of my child. I practiced patience in ways I had never known before. Waiting, watching, documenting, always observing from safe, emotional distance. Silence became a tool, not a weakness. Each day reinforced the importance of strategy over reaction in protecting her future. I felt my own transformation, my focus sharpening with each passing day. Anger existed, but it no longer controlled my behavior, only informed my planning. The antagonist continued to believe nothing had changed. Their obliviousness only confirmed the effectiveness of my restraint so far. I guided my daughter gently through recovery, never rushing her. Her pace dictated my actions, reinforcing that our safety was paramount. Every discovery, every pattern confirmed the need for deliberation. I cannot afford to act prematurely, even as urgency burned inside me. I refined my approach, considering each possible scenario carefully. Contingencies, responses, safety protocols, all meticulously planned in my mind. I understood that patience would yield better protection than confrontation. Every calculated step ensured her emotional and legal security simultaneously. As days passed, my resolve solidified. Silence was no longer passive. It was an active strategy in motion. I remained vigilant, attentive, and quietly relentless. Every observation reinforced the path I had chosen, guiding me toward inevitable escalation. Finally, I reached a point where preparation felt complete. I was ready to move deliberately, with purpose and unwavering intention for her safety. The choice to stay quiet had been excruciating, but it gave me the clarity, control, and readiness that anger alone could never provide. The first sign of carelessness was subtle, almost imperceptible. A casual comment that didn't align with prior statements, a detail too specific to ignore. I noticed immediately, heart tightening as contradictions stacked themselves in my mind. It wasn't just what was said, but how it was said, too quick, too certain, overly rehearsed. Small slips appeared in other moments, gestures that betrayed tension under the surface. They smiled, but eyes darted. Hands moved nervously despite outward calm. External pressures began building quietly, without confrontation. Visits overlapped, obligations multiplied, and their control started to fray at the edges. I felt a growing empowerment with every inconsistency I observed. It was subtle at first, a quiet satisfaction that clarity was on my side. My daughter's courage mirrored and magnified that strength. She started speaking up in small ways, offering suggestions, asking questions, asserting boundaries carefully. I watched her and felt a surge of protective resolve. Her bravery made my restraint purposeful, my planning sharper and more deliberate. Family dynamics began to shift, almost imperceptibly. Other relatives noticed tension but couldn't yet name its source. The antagonist's composure faltered in tiny, revealing moments. Conversations they thought casual carried hesitation. Words repeated unnecessarily. Laughter a touch too loud. I documented everything quietly, cataloging evidence without drawing attention. Patterns emerged, timelines clarified, and the puzzle became increasingly complete. Each slip reinforced my understanding of their tactics. Manipulation relied on certainty and control. When control wavered, cracks widened. My daughter noticed too, sensing subtle openings without understanding fully. Her confidence strengthened as she saw that boundaries could hold, that her voice had weight. I felt a shift within myself, confidence replacing fear. Observing rather than reacting revealed leverage I had never imagined before. The antagonist began noticing hints of loss, small but undeniable. A tightening in their jaw, a pause in speech, a glance. Lingering too long at my daughter's independence. I resisted, acting on impulse, holding back deliberately. Each observation became a strategic advantage, a chance to plan next steps methodically. Their overconfidence had been their greatest vulnerability. It revealed behaviors that had been hidden for years in plain sight, finally exposed by impatience. I began adjusting our routines subtly, exploiting openings while maintaining normalcy. Every day built towards something calculated, measured, and deliberate. My daughter's quiet strength reassured me constantly. She moved through the home more freely, trusting the space I had secured around her. I felt the balance of power begin to shift subtly, but unmistakably. The antagonist sensed the tension, but underestimated its significance entirely. I cataloged their reactions like a scientist, noting patterns, triggers, and inconsistencies carefully. Each detail sharpened my understanding. Each slip brought clarity to our path. The atmosphere at family gatherings changed imperceptibly. The air felt heavier, charged with unspoken awareness, a tension that hummed beneath ordinary smiles. I noticed the way they sought reassurance too often, questions posed to others that betrayed uncertainty. Each small move confirmed their weakening hold, validating the patience we had maintained. I felt a growing excitement tempered by restraint. Every slip, every mistake, brought us closer to the moment when silence would no longer be necessary. My daughter's courage gave me focus, her quiet endurance a reminder of what was at stake. She didn't need to know the details, only that her safety and voice mattered first. I began preparing for a calculated escalation. It would be deliberate, controlled, and undeniable, leaving no room for manipulation. Every observation reinforced the path I had chosen. Intelligence, patience, and restraint had created an opening finally visible and clear. I saw the vulnerability in their composure, the subtle cracks forming like fissures in stone. And I understood that the moment to act deliberately was approaching. I held back, letting tension build silently. The antagonist remained unaware, their mistakes giving us quiet advantage. It was empowering to witness this shift without confrontation. Control had begun moving into our hands, and I recognized the significance immediately. I continued documenting, observing, and guiding my daughter's recovery carefully. Every action reinforced safety. Every slip reinforced opportunity. Finally, I glimpsed the opening, precise and undeniable. The pattern was clear, the moment approaching, and our strategy ready to unfold. I began documenting everything meticulously, every detail recorded with care. Dates, times, conversations, small inconsistencies, all cataloged in a secure place I alone could access. It wasn't about vengeance, only clarity and proof. Each note, each observation built a foundation I could rely on when the time came. I considered legal consequences quietly, weighing each action carefully. This was about accountability, exposure, and consequences without violence. Social repercussions followed naturally in my calculations. The truth has a way of reaching people quietly, steadily, without my having to yell. Reputational impact became a tool, another lever I could use. I understood that the antagonist's careful construction could be undone with precision. I reminded myself constantly to maintain emotional restraint. Anger would have undermined everything, but calm focus amplified every action. My daughter remained my priority throughout every decision. Her comfort, her emotional security, her sense of safety guided every step forward. I observed the antagonist unknowingly, documenting missteps and slips. Every boast, every false assurance became evidence of their own undoing. I didn't confront them directly. I let their own actions reveal truth. Control had shifted subtly, without drama, leaving them exposed in plain sight. I prepared for each meeting, each potential confrontation with deliberate care. Every step was measured, every interaction considered through the lens of protection. I created a timeline, aligning behavior, patterns, and documentation into a coherent narrative. This clarity gave me confidence, a quiet power that felt steady in my hands. Legal counsel became part of the strategy quietly. Understanding rights, options, and limitations fortified the plan without alerting anyone prematurely. I began to see leverage in ways I hadn't anticipated. Truth itself became a tool, sharp and precise, stronger than any outburst of emotion. Every disclosure I planned was targeted, intentional, and limited to necessity. There was no room for overreach, only accountability and exposure. I watched my daughter regain confidence in small ways. Her laughter returned gradually, her steps less tentative, her eyes more trusting. Protecting her meant every action had to be subtle, invisible in the moment. Even as I collected evidence, I shielded her from its weight entirely. I reclaimed my own power through planning, observation, and patience. No longer reactive, I felt grounded, steady, and in control. I reviewed everything repeatedly, ensuring nothing was overlooked. Every detail mattered. Every alignment increased the probability of success. The antagonist's own overconfidence became an unintentional trap. Each mistake, each slip, each lie was now a component of the leverage I held. I stayed calm during family interactions, hiding the knowledge of what I knew. This restraint created tension invisible to everyone except me. I learned to speak softly, observe intently, and act decisively when required. Each moment became a test of patience and precision. The weight of justice rested in careful documentation rather than confrontation. Every step forward was deliberate, every decision measured against long-term outcomes. I built a quiet network of support, professionals who could advise without alerting the antagonist. Every conversation was discreet, every plan layered in security and foresight. I practiced restraint daily, letting the antagonist's behavior confirm my observations. There was no need to rush. Timing would enhance the effect exponentially. I found satisfaction in small, controlled victories of preparation. Knowledge, observation, and planning became my arsenal, silent but powerful. Each day reinforced my commitment to deliberate escalation. This wasn't about anger. It was about righting a wrong responsibly and effectively. I observed social interactions, noting reactions, inconsistencies, and microexpressions. Each tiny movement added another piece to the mosaic of truth. I avoided impulsive confrontation, knowing restraint carried far more weight. Every measured step strengthened our position without tipping my hand. My daughter's recovery and confidence became intertwined with my strategy. Protecting her and reclaiming control were inseparable goals now. Finally, a quiet moment arrived when the plan could begin in earnest. The opening was subtle, deliberate, and undeniable in its timing. I moved carefully, deliberately, with intention behind every step. Years of patience, observation, and documentation converged quietly in action. The truth, finally organized and ready, became leverage without force. Exposure would follow naturally, controlled and precise, leaving no room for manipulation. I held the quiet satisfaction of knowing preparation had replaced rage. Every piece of evidence, every observation, was a tool, a measure of safety and justice. And in that still moment, I acted decisively, not loudly, not violently, but with the certainty of calculated resolve guiding every move. The truth finally emerged quietly, almost too late to be ignored. It seeped into conversations, lingered in glances, and hovered in family spaces like a weight no one could dismiss. Reactions were immediate and varied. Some recoiled in denial, shaking their heads, refusing to believe what they now saw. Others showed shock so palpable it made the room vibrate silently. Eyes widened, mouths tightened, hands clenched unconsciously in laps or against table edges. Guilt hung in the air for some, thick and almost suffocating. I watched as expressions shifted subtly, a mix of regret and self-recrimination etched into faces. I kept calm, speaking only in facts, letting documentation and observation speak louder than emotion. The silence around me amplified each revelation, giving gravity to every detail I presented. The antagonist's credibility crumbled before our eyes. Every carefully constructed facade faltered, lies exposed through contradictions and evidence I had gathered patiently. I noticed subtle signs of panic in them, a stiff posture, fingers brushing nervously over clothing. They realized control had slipped entirely, their authority unmasked and eroded. Finally, there was release, quiet but intense, for both my daughter and me. A tension that had lived in our bodies for years slowly exhaled through shudders, soft tears, and tentative smiles. The Thanksgiving omission, once a point of silent confusion, now made perfect sense. Every glance, every skipped name, now revealed its intentionality, a message everyone could understand at last. Family hierarchy began shifting under the weight of truth. Those who had silently protected the antagonist began re-evaluating allegiances and perceptions, cautious but inevitable. The antagonist tried to maintain composure, but the effort was hollow. Their words fell flat, explanations stumbled, and excuses no longer carried any sway. Other family members whispered quietly among themselves, sharing disbelief, horror, and tentative support. The room's energy shifted from tension to collective reckoning, subtle yet undeniable. I watched my daughter's eyes light with understanding, relief tempered with lingering vulnerability. She realized her perspective had finally been validated, her silence and caution respected and seen. The atmosphere felt dense with unspoken acknowledgement. Each member of the family recalibrated their awareness, quietly, without fanfare or dramatics. I noticed the antagonist retreating into corners of the room, isolated physically as well as socially. Their presence, once central, became marginal, their influence evaporating in the face of shared truth. Conversations I had previously avoided now unfolded naturally, grounded in honesty and fact. People asked questions, listened carefully, and finally confronted what they had suspected but could not name. The calm I maintained throughout served as an anchor for everyone else. My measured approach allowed clarity to permeate without panic, guiding understanding steadily. Family dynamics shifted subtly, permanently. Alliances realigned, trust redistributed, and the balance of authority recalculated in quiet, careful ways. My daughter and I felt the first real safety in years. No longer did we need to tread lightly, explain subtly, or guard every word and movement. The antagonist's attempts at manipulation now seemed futile and transparent. Every gesture they made carried the weight of exposure, making every interaction awkward and strained. I observed the final moments of social dominance evaporate. Their confidence waned with each exchange, eyes flicking nervously toward my daughter, seeking approval and finding none. Empowerment for us came not through confrontation, but through truth revealed methodically and undeniably. The balance had shifted without theatrics, and control now rested where it belonged. The family's acknowledgement felt like a slow tide, washing over previously rigid structures. People nodded, whispered support, and offered reassurance quietly, signaling shifts in loyalty and understanding. I felt a profound sense of vindication without malice. Patience, careful planning, and restraint had brought justice quietly but powerfully. The antagonist was now isolated, surrounded not by fear or obedience, but by silence and recognition of their misdeeds. Their authority gone, presence diminished, their role permanently altered within the family dynamic. My daughter exhaled a breath I hadn't realized she had been holding. I reached for her hand, grounding her, sharing the moment without words. The room had changed, subtly yet permanently, in ways that words could scarcely capture. Truth had shifted the landscape, unearthing power and clarity long buried under appearances. The Thanksgiving omission now resonated as the first clear sign of what had been hidden. It became a marker for understanding, a pivot point for the family to finally see what had always been present. I watched the antagonist's attempts at normalcy falter completely. Every effort to regain control seemed meaningless, swallowed by collective awareness and quiet judgment. For the first time in years, my daughter's voice, perspective, and courage felt fully acknowledged. And for the first time, the antagonist stood alone, stripped of influence, seen clearly by everyone. The family now faced a new balance, one rooted in transparency and recognition of truth. Silence had been broken, power redistributed, and understanding restored quietly, decisively. I felt the weight lift slightly, a release of tension for both my daughter and myself. The Thanksgiving dinner, once frozen in awkward omission, finally made sense to everyone, leaving clarity and quiet resolution in its wake. That I watched her quietly, noticing how much she had carried alone. Years of silence weighed on her like a stone, yet she bore it with an astonishing, quiet strength. Every glance she offered was measured, careful, wary of reaction. Even in her smallest gestures, I saw the tension of vigilance she had maintained for so long. Her resilience stunned me, more than I had realized in the rush of daily life. She had endured, adapted, and survived in a space that should have been safe. I thought about the nights I hadn't noticed, the questions I hadn't asked. My guilt pressed heavily against my chest, sharp and insistent. Even in small moments, she had withheld pieces of herself to protect me. She had adjusted her behavior, learned caution, and silenced her voice to navigate fear. It was overwhelming to realize the depth of her burden. Every smile she gave was an act of courage. Every laugh, a careful step forward. I reflected on my own failings honestly, acknowledging what I had ignored. The weight of responsibility was clear, the need for validation immediate and necessary. I began validating her experience gently, letting her know that her voice mattered. No pressure, no urgency, just patient acknowledgement of what she had endured silently. I saw relief flicker in her eyes, brief but undeniable. The act of being heard, of having her experience recognized, began to release tension she had carried for years. Her posture softened, shoulders easing slowly as trust took root. Even her breathing became steadier, a sign of internal space opening for healing. I reminded myself daily to listen first, act second, and protect relentlessly. Every interaction became a small exercise in rebuilding safety and confidence. Her courage in facing the truth strengthened my own resolve. Seeing her reclaim small freedoms inspired a protective determination I hadn't realized I still possessed. I began noticing her voice returning in subtle ways. Questions asked softly, opinions offered cautiously, laughter allowed to linger just a little longer. Each step forward, however small, felt monumental. We both knew the path was long, but progress was tangible and undeniable. I held her hand when memories surfaced, grounding her in shared presence. Her trust in me deepened as I stayed calm and consistent, providing an anchor she had lacked. The silence that had once defined our home slowly began to break. Words emerged in fragments at first, then in sentences, then in stories fully told. I confronted my own guilt not with blame, but with action, ensuring her safety, amplifying her voice, and reclaiming control where I had failed before. I watched her begin to navigate family spaces with steadier confidence. Her eyes no longer darted in fear, her steps no longer tentative, her presence growing. Visible. The parent-child bond strengthened through this process, unspoken but undeniable. Every shared glance, every touch, reinforced connection, trust, and love rebuilt carefully. I felt her reclaiming identity piece by piece, her resilience now paired with acknowledgement. Her courage, once hidden, became a foundation for both of us to stand on. I remained patient, letting her lead in disclosure and timing. Every story she shared was met with understanding, not interrogation, allowing autonomy in her voice. Healing unfolded slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. Small gestures, quiet affirmations, and shared routines carried weight far beyond their simplicity. I celebrated each breakthrough internally, though externally I remained composed. Pride and relief mingled silently as she grew stronger in the space we had rebuilt together. The trauma she had endured could not be erased, but acknowledgement eased its weight. Validation, patience, and unwavering support became tools for reclaiming normalcy. We began speaking openly about her feelings without fear or judgment. Every honest conversation further reinforced her voice, her agency, and her courage. I felt my own heart lighten alongside hers, the shared burden diminishing gradually. Where once I had carried fear and anger, now there was focus and purpose. Her laughter returned more fully, sometimes quiet, sometimes sharp, always genuine. I realized that joy, once suppressed, could now re-enter our lives without hesitation. We reclaimed moments together, small acts of normalcy that reinforced our bond. Movies, walks, shared meals. Each ordinary moment a building block for trust and healing. I recognized that my daughter's resilience had always been remarkable. Now paired with acknowledgement and protection, it blossomed into strength visible to both of us. The process of mutual healing began quietly, steadily, without fanfare. Her voice grew confident, my support consistent, creating a space safe enough for both of us. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for her courage and patience. Our connection, tested and strained, became unshakable in its renewed clarity. In reclaiming her voice, I also reclaimed my own sense of purpose. Together, we navigated the aftermath, steady, resilient, and quietly whole again. I keep returning in my mind to that Thanksgiving moment, watching her stand at the head of the table. Each word she spoke, each name she uttered, now carries a depth I only understand fully in hindsight. The person she didn't thank sits there, visible yet invisible in the silence that followed. At the time, it was a jarring pause, a void that I didn't know how to read. Now, I see the symbolism clearly. The omission was deliberate, a quiet declaration of truth without a single shout or confrontation. Her silence spoke louder than any accusation could. It drew attention to absence, demanded reflection, and asserted power without violence. I feel a mix of pride and sorrow watching her act in memory. Pride for her courage, her composure, and her ability to claim agency. Sorrow for the years she carried burdens alone, the knowledge she bore silently. Every withheld word weighed heavily on her, shaping her restraint into strength. Reframing that Thanksgiving act, I realized it was one of the bravest choices she could make. She wielded silence as a shield and a sword, protecting herself and asserting moral authority simultaneously. I recall the reactions at the table: confusion, forced smiles, subtle discomfort. They had no idea the weight behind her words, the meaning in what remained unsaid. The moment of omission becomes an emblem of justice. Not vengeance, not humiliation, simply truth quietly acknowledged and power subtly reclaimed. I feel my own emotions stabilize as I recognize her mastery of the situation. Her restraint shows intelligence and courage beyond her years, and I am humbled to witness it. The antagonist's loss becomes apparent through contrast. Once commanding attention, once wielding influence, now diminished by the force of absence. I notice how the family shifts unconsciously around her strength. The silence she maintained forces reflection, reshaping perceptions and realigning loyalties. That quiet act carries an undeniable authority. It exposes wrongdoing, validates her experience, and asserts moral clarity without a single spoken accusation. I feel closure beginning in subtle ways. No longer do I question her omission. Now I understand its necessity and its power. Her growth becomes palpable, filling the space where fear once resided. Confidence replaces hesitation, presence replaces withdrawal, and dignity replaces compliance. The weight of unspoken truth transforms into liberation. Each withheld word strengthens her voice rather than diminishes it, a paradox I admire endlessly. I reflect on my own response at the time. I was stunned, protective, fearful, yet unaware that her choice was deliberate, controlled, and meaningful. Now I see how her silence asserted both autonomy and protection. It shielded her, minimized exposure, and made her statement indelible in its subtlety. The antagonist's attempts to maintain control falter against the quiet force of her decision. Their credibility erodes while her moral authority quietly solidifies. I think about how silence can be justice. No confrontation, no spectacle, only consequence delivered through awareness and perception. That Thanksgiving omission becomes a lesson in restraint and power. Words left unspoken can be sharper than any confrontation, stronger than any accusation. I feel peace settling in as I revisit the memory. The choice she made, deliberate and composed, resonates deeply within me. I realize that the silence carries weight precisely because it is controlled. It honors her boundaries, her safety, and her intelligence while revealing truth to those who must see it. The quiet justice of her act is subtle yet undeniable. Every gesture, every pause, every careful omission communicates more than words ever could. I notice how this choice shapes our understanding of courage and restraint. Her actions demonstrate that power is not always loud. Sometimes it is invisible and precise. I am proud in a way I can hardly articulate. Her strength shines not in confrontation, but in calculated patience and moral clarity. Sorrow lingers too, a soft echo for the pain she carried alone. Yet even that sorrow transforms into respect for her endurance and wisdom. I feel the balance finally shift in memory and understanding. Her silence delivers justice, maintains dignity, and asserts her truth with elegance. I rest in the quiet knowledge that her choice was right. The Thanksgiving table, frozen in that moment, now stands as a testament to her strength. The antagonist remains diminished, isolated by the moral clarity of her restraint. Power has transferred quietly, unspoken yet irrefutable, leaving truth firmly in her hands. I watch her in my mind, poised, calm, and unwavering. Her act of omission resonates with courage, integrity, and a quiet assertion of justice. And finally, I am at peace with the choice she made. Silent, deliberate, profound. It was hers to make, and it was perfect in its wisdom that I chose a path that required patience, observation, and precision. There would be no shouting, no public confrontation, no dramatic spectacle. Every move was calculated to protect my daughter's future while ensuring consequences arrived naturally. I let truth, evidence, and perception do the work for me, quietly but relentlessly. The antagonist's missteps compounded under their own overconfidence. Patterns emerged clearly, contradictions became undeniable, and accountability took shape without a word from me. I felt a satisfaction that was subtle but profound. It wasn't the thrill of revenge, but the quiet power of watching justice unfold deliberately. Each document, each observation, each small piece of corroboration became a tool. I wielded these carefully, ensuring that exposure would be inevitable without my hand appearing to strike. No drama was needed. The weight of truth carried everything. The silence around our actions made the consequences sting more than any public display could. I protected my daughter's presence throughout every stage. Her safety, her emotional well-being, and her dignity guided every decision I made. I watched as the antagonist's influence eroded imperceptibly. They were forced to confront the consequences of their own actions, without my having to raise my voice. The satisfaction I felt was tempered by restraint. Every step was measured, every response calculated to maintain dignity and control. Family dynamics shifted around us quietly. Allies and observers began to see the truth, their understanding reinforcing the natural course of justice. I marveled at how restraint amplified impact. By refusing to escalate emotionally, I maintained authority while letting their actions speak against them. My daughter's confidence grew alongside the unfolding truth. She saw that we could reclaim power without resorting to anger or spectacle. I kept detailed records, timelines, and notes, all carefully organized. These were not weapons of vengeance, but safeguards and instruments of accountability. The antagonist remained unaware of how fully they were exposed. Their overconfidence became the mechanism of their own downfall, entirely self-generated. I felt pride, not only for the outcome, but for the method we employed. Dignity, intelligence, and patience created consequences stronger than any confrontation could. We avoided unnecessary public embarrassment, relying on subtle shifts and awareness. Every reaction from others was measured, guided by perception rather than manipulation. I saw how justice could feel earned rather than forced. Consequences emerged from truth itself, quietly, methodically, without theatrics. My daughter learned the power of restraint alongside me. She saw that strength often lies in observation, patience, and precise action rather than confrontation. I felt a calm satisfaction settling over me. The antagonist faced the consequences, we remained protected, and no dignity was lost. We moved through family spaces with newfound confidence. The weight of secrecy lifted, and the environment became safer, calmer, and more predictable. I reflected on the lessons patience had taught us. Power exercised intelligently, without drama, proved stronger and more enduring than impulsive revenge. Each subtle ripple of consequence reminded me that justice could be quiet yet effective. No one needed to know the full orchestration to see the outcome clearly. The antagonist's diminished credibility became a natural result of their own actions. No forced confession or confrontation was necessary. Truth accomplished everything. I allowed myself a moment to appreciate the equilibrium we had created. Silence, observation, and careful planning had reshaped power entirely in our favor. I felt the satisfaction of restraint, a calm I had not known in years. Anger had been replaced by intelligence, and fear by confidence in measured action. My daughter's recovery and growth mirrored the method of justice we had applied. She could move freely, speak her mind, and navigate the world safely while consequences unfolded naturally. I noted the final subtle shifts in the antagonist's demeanor. Confidence eroded, composure faltered, and isolation settled around them like a quiet shadow. There was no need for dramatics or retaliation. Everything had been handled strategically, methodically, and with care for our emotional safety. The quiet intelligence of our approach left me deeply satisfied. Justice had been exacted without cruelty, without spectacle, and without the erosion of dignity. I watched my daughter flourish in this new environment. Her voice returned, her laughter deepened, and her presence became undeniable. The antagonist's attempts to regain control were futile. Every action they took now revealed further cracks, reinforcing the effectiveness of restraint. I understood fully that calm and precision could wield more power than rage. Every subtle maneuver, every observation, every deliberate pause strengthened our position. The resolution settled over us, quiet, controlled, and complete. We had reclaimed authority, ensured safety, and let consequences unfold without a raised voice. I breathed deeply, allowing myself to finally relax. The strategy, the patience, the intelligence, it had all led to this calm, enduring outcome. Justice was served, dignity preserved, and our bond reinforced. In the stillness that followed, I felt a peace I had not known for years. Looking back at that Thanksgiving table, I realized how much it taught me about listening and belief. The simple act of paying attention, of noticing pauses and omissions, held far more meaning than words alone. I learned that silence can speak volumes when heard with care. Our daughter's quiet strength revealed truths I had failed to see for years. Belief became a lesson in trust, both in her and in my own instincts. Assuming the best without scrutiny had its limits, and vigilance had its place. Protection is more than physical. It is emotional, psychological, and constant. I came to understand that keeping her safe meant respecting her experiences and validating her choices. The Thanksgiving table itself became symbolic, a place of reflection and revelation. What once seemed ordinary now radiated significance. Each plate and utensil a marker of history and growth. I see my daughter now not only as resilient, but as courageous in ways I had underestimated. Her composure, discretion, and strength reshaped how I understood bravery. Family was redefined in that space. Loyalty, trust, and care had to be recalibrated, and the hierarchy of influence silently shifted. I realized that my responsibility extended beyond protection to acknowledgement. Hearing, validating, and trusting her became just as crucial as shielding her from harm. The moral lessons were subtle but profound. Justice can be achieved through patience, observation, and strategic restraint, rather than confrontation or force. I recognized the importance of paying attention to small signals. A glance, a pause, a hesitation. These could carry more weight than entire conversations. I learned to value dignity in both action and reaction. Holding myself and others accountable did not require anger. It required clarity, patience, and resolve. The table became a mirror of growth and healing. Each family member's reaction reflected layers of understanding, remorse, and eventual acknowledgement. I saw how silence, carefully maintained, could become a tool of empowerment. Our daughter's unspoken choice reshaped the narrative without a single raised voice. I recognized my own emotional evolution in the process. Guilt transformed into vigilance, fear into protection, and helplessness into measured action. Observing her courage instilled lessons I hope to carry forward indefinitely. Strength is not always loud or visible. Sometimes it is quiet, deliberate, and enduring. The family I knew was no longer the same, reshaped by revelation and accountability. Boundaries, trust, and respect have been recalibrated, creating a safer and more honest environment. I learned the value of deliberate action. Every decision, every pause, every moment of restraint contributed to a just outcome. The emotional closure that followed was slow and gentle. No grand gestures, no proclamations, only understanding, reassurance, and quiet affirmation. I discovered gratitude in unexpected places, for resilience, for patience, for courage, and for the ability to witness truth unfold without chaos. Hope entered alongside closure, soft but persistent. The lessons of vigilance, empathy, and protection now illuminate the path forward for both of us. I understood finally that listening is an act of love. Belief is a gift, and trust must be earned and maintained carefully. The Thanksgiving table, once frozen in awkward silence, now represents learning and transformation. Each share, each plate, each moment carries meaning I will carry with me always. I saw that justice does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, measured, and precise. And when it does, it can protect, empower, and restore without cruelty or spectacle. My daughter's courage remains a constant inspiration. Her voice, once quiet and cautious, now resonates with clarity and purpose. I'm grateful for the lessons she taught me without knowing it. Her strength, patience, and restraint reshaped my understanding of parenting, justice, and trust. The family, transformed by truth, now functions with honesty at its core. Loyalty and love have been redefined, stronger and more resilient than before. I feel a profound sense of calm as I reflect. The tension, the fear, the uncertainty, they have all been met with clarity, action, and love. I carry forward the understanding that silence, patience, and measured response are powerful. They can reshape relationships, protect the vulnerable, and restore balance in ways confrontation cannot. In that quiet, reflective space, I found gratitude for both lessons and growth. For the resilience of my daughter, for the strength of our bond, and for the clarity we finally share. Hope lingers gently, rooted in understanding and shared experience. We move forward together, stronger, wiser, and more attuned to the truths that matter. The Thanksgiving table, once a site of tension and omission, now holds meaning of enduring significance. It represents vigilance, courage, and the transformative power of listening, believing, and protecting. And in that understanding, I find peace, gratitude, and quiet hope.